Hello, my dears. My name is Antonia Rogers, and I'm 68 years old. Today I'm going to share with you the most painful story of my life. But before I begin, I'd like to ask you to like this video, subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel, and comment where you're watching from. This helps me continue sharing my stories with more people. Are you comfortable? Have you grabbed your coffee or tea? Then let's begin. I was born in 1957 in a small town in Virginia where everyone knew each other by name. My childhood was simple, but full of love. There was me, my father John, my mother Helen, and my 3 siblings. Mom was always a beautiful woman, the kind that turned heads wherever she went. Even after having 4 children, she maintained a level of elegance that was admired by all the women in town. Dad passed away when I was only 18, victim of a sudden heart attack that left our family completely unsupported. It was during this time that I met Augustus. He came to our town to work at the local bank, a well-mannered, educated 23-year-old man with that city charm that captivated any small-town girl. I remember as if it were yesterday the day he walked into the fabric store where I worked. He said he needed to buy a present for his mother. We talked for almost an hour, and before leaving, he invited me for ice cream on Sunday after church. It was a quick courtship. In 6 months, we were engaged, and within a year, we were married. Mom seemed so happy about my marriage that she involved herself in every detail. Now I understand there may have been other reasons for such enthusiasm. In the early years, we were very happy. We built our house with great sacrifice, brick by brick. Augustus grew at the bank, becoming a manager. We had 2 wonderful children, Claude and Marina. Mom, who had been widowed young, was always very present in our home. How lucky you are to have such a helpful mother, my friends would say. I believed this with all my heart. At first, there were small signs that I chose to ignore. Augustus began working late at the bank several times a week. When he came home, he would shower before even greeting me. Mom started showing up always very well dressed, with new perfumes she claimed were gifts from a friend in the city. At family gatherings, I noticed glances that lasted longer than they should, seemingly innocent touches that bothered me without my knowing why. We celebrated 25 years of marriage with a big party. It was on that day that my world began to crumble, although I would only discover this 5 years later. I have a photo from that day, me in the middle, Augustus to my right, Mom to my left, all 3 smiling. Today, I can see in their eyes a shared secret that completely excluded me. At 30 years of marriage, I was already 53, Augustus 58, and Mom 75 years old. Even at her age, she maintained that impressive elegance. That April afternoon, I returned early from my daughter's house. I had gone to help with the newborn baby, my first grandchild, but Marina said everything was under control and that I could rest a bit. I decided to surprise Augustus, who was off that day. The gate was unlocked, which I found strange. I entered without making noise, thinking of surprising him. That's when I heard laughter coming from our bedroom. I immediately recognized Mom's voice, that characteristic laugh she gave when she was especially happy. I should have knocked on the door, announced my presence, anything, but something made me turn the doorknob silently. What I saw in that room, in our bed, will never leave my memory. My husband and my mother wrapped in the sheets that I myself had changed that morning. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I closed the door as silently as I had opened it and left the house. I walked for hours around town, trying to process what I had seen. When I returned home, they were in the living room watching television as if nothing had happened. Augustus asked me where I'd been with that false concern that I now clearly recognized. Mom said she had stopped by to leave a dessert she had made especially for me. I sat between them and smiled. It was at that moment that I decided they would pay dearly for every minute of humiliation they had made me endure. The following weeks were a test of my sanity. I continued treating them both normally, perhaps even more affectionately than before. I carefully observed every movement, every glance exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking. I began to pay attention to the accounts, the schedules, the details that I previously let pass. I discovered that their affair had probably started in the early years of my marriage. 30 years of betrayal, of lies, of deception. One afternoon, while organizing Augustus's office, something I rarely did, I found a set of old letters kept in a cigar box at the bottom of a drawer. They were letters from Mom to him, dated a few months after our wedding. The content was too explicit for me to repeat here, but it made clear that their affair began practically at the same time as my marriage. That's when my plan was born. It wouldn't be an impulsive revenge driven by momentary anger. It would be something calculated, cold, that would hit them exactly where it would hurt most, in front of the entire community that respected them so much. I began by suggesting to Augustus that we should renew our vows to celebrate our 30 years together. He hesitated initially, but I insisted so much that he eventually agreed. Mom, of course, immediately offered to help with all the preparations. "It will be the most beautiful party this town has ever seen," she promised, not knowing she was helping prepare her own public humiliation. For 6 months, I planned every detail of that party. I invited everyone in town, friends, family, colleagues, neighbors. No one could miss it. I hired the best caterer, impeccable decoration, live music. I spent a small fortune, but I knew every penny would be worth it. Simultaneously, I began to move the pieces of my other plan. I opened a secret bank account and little by little transferred small amounts from our joint money that I also helped earn over the years working as a teacher and later as a principal at the local school. I discreetly sold some jewelry I had received over the years, including presents that Augustus gave me on our wedding anniversaries, probably driven by guilt. I also began casually discussing with Augustus the importance of securing our future. I suggested we could expand the small ranch we had inherited from his parents and transform it into a family business. He loved the idea, especially when I mentioned we could build a smaller house there for when we retired. "For just the two of us," I said, holding his hands and looking into his lying eyes. With the help of my son, who is a lawyer, but without revealing my true intentions, of course, I prepared all the necessary documents to transfer the ranch exclusively to my name. I told Augustus it was just a formality, an organizational matter for the future business. He signed all the papers without even reading them properly, blindly trusting me. The irony didn't escape me. Meanwhile, the vow renewal celebration was approaching. Mom and Augustus were completely involved in the preparations, thinking I was too busy with other details to notice the moments they stole together. I smiled, pretended not to see, and continued with my plan. 1 week before the party, I hired a nephew of a friend who worked with video production. I asked him to prepare a retrospective of our life together using family photos and videos. "I want to surprise my husband with memories of our 30 years of union," I explained. I gave him a careful selection of happy photos and videos, moments that seemed to portray a perfect marriage. What no one knew was that I had a second set of images. Over the last few months, I had discreetly installed small cameras around the house, especially in places where I knew they used to meet when they thought I was out. I captured intimate moments, compromising conversations, confessions of years of betrayal. Everything was documented, ready to be revealed at the right moment. As the big day approached, I felt a strange calmness. It was no longer anger that moved me, but a sense of justice. They had stolen 30 years of my life, built a relationship behind my back, mocked my trust. Now they would have to face the consequences. The signs had always been there, like those small cracks that appear on walls that we paint over, thinking the problem has disappeared. But it continues there, growing silently until one day the entire structure threatens to collapse. I remember one Christmas, I think it was 1975. We had been married for just 2 years. Augustus said he needed to stop by the bank to resolve an emergency with an important client. It was Christmas Eve. Who resolves banking problems on Christmas Eve? Mom, who was with us for dinner, suggested that I finish preparing the turkey while she went to midnight mass. Curious how both left almost at the same time, and returned also with few minutes' difference. Mom with her lipstick slightly smudged, Augustus with a shirt button closed in the wrong place. I noticed, but convinced myself I was imagining things. In 1981, my father was in the hospital in his last days. We took turns staying with him. One night, when it was my turn, I received a call from Augustus saying he needed to pick up some documents at the hospital for the insurance. I found the time strange. It was already past 10 p.m. When I briefly left to get a coffee, I saw the two of them in the hallway. Augustus was holding Mom's hand, consoling her, they said. I returned silently to Dad's room, pretending not to have seen anything. The poor man died believing that his wife loved him above all else. Wedding anniversaries were particularly painful now that I look back. Augustus always made a point of celebrating in grand style in the early years. I thought it was out of love. Later I realized it was out of guilt. And Mom always gifted us with something for the house. "For your love nest?" she would say with a smile that I now recognize as cynical. On our 20th anniversary, she gave us imported bedsheets to warm up the winter nights, she said, winking at Augustus. At the time, I interpreted it as a mother-in-law joke. Today, I know it was a private joke between lovers. There was once, I think in 1992, that I found an unknown earring in Augustus's car. I confronted him immediately. He got nervous, said he had no idea how that had gotten there. The following Sunday, when Mom came to have lunch with us, I realized it was the pair of the earring I had found. I casually mentioned the finding during lunch. Mom almost choked on her wine. "It must be from his secretary," she quickly suggested. "You know how careless these young women are." Augustus emphatically agreed, thanking my mother for the clarification. Another piece of the puzzle that I refused to put together. The 90s were particularly difficult. Our teenage children demanded attention. I had just taken the position of school principal, and Augustus was increasingly distant. Bank meetings multiplied. Sometimes he would come home smelling of women's perfume. "It's the perfume of the regional manager," he would explain. Curious how this perfume was exactly the same that Mom had started using. Mom, always so present, always so helpful, would appear without warning when I was at work. "I came to help with the house," she would say when I returned and found her there. The bedding, strangely, always needed to be changed on these days. She insisted on washing it personally, claiming she knew how to care for fine fabrics. I thanked her, interpreting it as maternal affection. What a fool I was. In 1998, Mom suffered a fall and broke her femur. She needed surgery and a long recovery. Augustus offered to pick her up every day for physical therapy sessions. "You're busy at school, dear," he argued, "and your mother has always been like a mother to me, too." The irony of that phrase now makes me feel nauseous. During those months, they spent hours together. I would receive calls at work. "Don't worry, we'll be a little longer at physical therapy today." And I, always trusting, always blind, thanked them for the consideration. Our children grew up without suspecting anything, or at least that's what I hope. Claude graduated in law and moved to New York. Marina married early and went to live in Boston with her husband. With the house emptier, their meetings became even more frequent. Still, they maintained the facade of perfection. Augustus, the exemplary son-in-law, Mom, the dedicated mother-in-law. In 2002, we took a trip to Florida, our first big trip in years. Augustus suggested we invite Mom. "She's alone and would love to see Miami," he said. During that week, I noticed several times the two of them disappearing together. We went to buy water. We were looking at the souvenir shops. They always had an excuse ready. One night I woke up and didn't find Augustus in bed. I went out to look for him and found him on the hotel balcony, whispering on the phone. "We need to be more careful," he was saying. When he noticed my presence, he quickly hung up. "It was from the bank," he explained. At 3 a.m, I pretended to believe. The worst of all were the special dates. On Mom's birthdays, Augustus always made a point of buying elaborate gifts. "Your mother deserves the best," he would say. On my birthday, I got flowers and a hasty card. At end-of-year celebrations, the looks between them intensified as the night progressed and the wine flowed freely. Several times I caught them in isolated corners, talking intimately, moving away when someone approached. In 2010, I found prescriptions in Mom's name in Augustus's jacket pocket. When questioned, he said he had gone to the pharmacy for her. She wasn't feeling well and asked me this favor. Why didn't she ask me her own daughter? The answer is now clear. The year 2015 brought an unexpected turn. Augustus suffered a minor stroke that left him hospitalized for 2 weeks. Mom practically moved into the hospital. "I'm helping my daughter during this difficult time," she explained to the nurses. "I worked during the day and stayed with him at night." She did the day shift. A nurse once asked me why the wife only came during the day. I was confused until I realized she was referring to Mom. "There must be a mistake," I replied. But there wasn't. As Augustus recovered, I noticed notes exchanged between them, small papers that quickly disappeared when I approached. Once I picked up one that had fallen on the floor. "We need to talk about A." The handwriting was Mom's. At the time, I thought A was some medication or treatment. Now I know it was my name, Antonia. In 2017, I began having insomnia problems. My doctor prescribed some mild remedies that made me sleep deeply. One of those nights, I woke up briefly with the feeling that there was someone in the room. I half opened my eyes and saw Augustus silently getting dressed. I looked at the clock. 2:30 in the morning. The next day, I asked if he had left the bed during the night. "You must have dreamed, dear," he replied, with a kiss on my forehead. That same day, Mom showed up with a surprise cake. "I had insomnia and decided to bake in the middle of the night," she explained. The last years before the discovery were filled with these moments, small fragments of evidence that I deliberately ignored. The cell phone that Augustus never left nearby, the calls he answered moving away to another room, the messages he hastily deleted. Mom's visits that strangely coincided with emergency meetings at the bank. In 2019, I found a motel receipt in Augustus's pants pocket. When confronted, he invented an elaborate story about a friend who was having an affair and asked him to reserve the room. I didn't believe it, but I accepted the explanation because the truth was too painful to face. In early 2020, just before the pandemic, Mom began having health problems. Nothing serious, but enough for Augustus to show excessive concern. He insisted that she temporarily move into our house. "This way we can take better care of her," he argued. During the 6 weeks she stayed with us, I noticed the looks, the accidental touches, the whispers when they thought I wasn't around. It was during the pandemic that things began to become more evident. With everyone at home, meetings became more difficult for them. The tension was palpable. Augustus would get irritated over anything. Mom would call several times a day with increasingly less convincing excuses. "I just wanted to know if you need anything from the market," she would say, even knowing we were doing all shopping online. At Christmas 2021, with restrictions more flexible, we had a small family gathering. My son Claude came from New York with his girlfriend. During dinner, he casually mentioned that he had seen Augustus's car parked near Grandma's building several times in recent months when he went to drop off groceries for her. "How nice that you're taking care of Mom," he said, looking at me. Augustus almost choked on the turkey. Mom spilled her wine glass. For the first time, I allowed myself to openly consider what I had been suspecting for decades. Then came that April afternoon in 2022, the final, irrefutable discovery. After 30 years living a lie, I finally faced the truth. And contrary to what they might expect, the truth didn't destroy me. It freed me to meticulously plan how I would rebuild my life after exposing theirs to the public scrutiny they so feared. After that April afternoon that changed everything, I returned home and did what no one would expect. Absolutely nothing. I didn't confront, didn't scream, didn't cry in front of them. Instead, I kissed Augustus as I always did when I arrived, thanked Mom for the dessert she said she had brought especially for me, and went on with my routine. But inside, something had fundamentally changed. It was as if a switch had been flipped, transforming 3 decades of voluntary blindness into a painful clarity. That same night, lying beside the man who had betrayed me throughout our married life, I elaborated the first lines of what would become the perfect plan. It wouldn't be an impulsive revenge, motivated by immediate anger. It would be something calculated, cold, executed with the same patience they had to deceive me for 30 years. The next morning, I opened a new notebook and began documenting everything. Dates, times, excuses used, suspicious behaviors. I searched through my memory for all the strange moments I had justified over the years. Each filled page confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't about some isolated encounters, but a parallel relationship that probably began even before my marriage. In May 2022, I initiated the financial phase of my plan. First, I needed to completely understand our economic situation, something I had always left in Augustus's hands. I asked to see the bank statements, claiming concern about the approaching retirement. He hesitated but ended up showing them. With the excuse of wanting to learn more about finances, I began to take on some administrative responsibilities, gaining access to passwords and documents. It was shocking to discover that Augustus had a separate account that received regular deposits. When questioned, he said it was a private pension he was saving as a surprise for our retirement. I accepted the explanation with a smile while secretly photographing all the documents. In June, I made my first concrete move. I opened a bank account exclusively in my name at a different bank than the one we used. I began transferring small monthly amounts, values that wouldn't draw attention, but that over time would accumulate significantly. I also began discreetly selling some less used jewelry. For each piece sold, I invented a story. I lent it to Marina. It must be in that box in the attic. I haven't used it in years, maybe I donated it. In July, I made an appointment with a lawyer in a neighboring town where no one knew me. I wanted to understand my rights in case of divorce due to proven infidelity. The lawyer explained that with concrete evidence, I would have considerable advantages in the division of assets. That's when I realized I would need irrefutable proof. In August, with the excuse of modernizing the house, I discreetly installed small cameras in strategic areas. Not in the intimate areas. I still maintained some sense of decency, something they clearly didn't have. But in places where I frequently caught them in whispered conversations, the office, the back porch, the living room, when I supposedly wasn't around. I also installed a recorder in Augustus's car and a mirror app on his cell phone during a night when he took his sleeping pills. September brought the first concrete evidence, recordings of explicit conversations, unequivocal text messages, images that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Each new discovery was like a stab, but I remained firm in my purpose. I viewed everything methodically, creating digital copies stored in various locations. It was in October, while reviewing our old tax documents, that I found something truly disturbing. Regular transfers from the joint account to Mom's personal account, which Augustus justified as help for his mother-in-law. In the records, these transfers began a few months after our wedding and continued for decades. We were talking about a considerable amount over the years, our money from our work and savings that he diverted to her. In that same month, the perfect opportunity arose. During a dinner with friends, someone mentioned a couple who had renewed their vows after 50 years of marriage. I looked at Augustus with bright eyes of false admiration and said, "Wouldn't it be wonderful if we did that for our 30 years?" He choked on his wine, but in front of friends, he couldn't refuse. The seed was planted. In November, I formally presented the idea of the vow renewal planned for April 2023, coinciding exactly with our 30th anniversary. I spoke with such enthusiasm, painted such a perfect picture of the celebration, that Augustus ended up yielding. Mom, when she found out, immediately offered to help. "No one knows my daughter's taste better than I do," she said, with that smile that now gave me chills. December 2022 was crucial. Under the pretext of the year-end holidays, I invited the whole family to our house, including my son Claude. Taking advantage of his legal training, I asked for his help to organize some papers. I explained that I wanted to surprise Augustus by transforming the small ranch we had inherited from his parents into a retirement project. Claude, without suspecting my true intentions, prepared all the necessary documents to transfer the property exclusively to my name. On Christmas Eve, between smiles and champagne, I presented the documents for Augustus to sign. "It's just to start the ranch project, dear, an early Christmas present for our retirement." He signed without reading, as I knew he would. At that moment, the ranch, the only asset that was solely in his name, became legally mine. January 2023 was dedicated to the party preparations. I hired the best caterer, reserved the most elegant hall in town, ordered elaborate decorations. Augustus began to show concern about the expenses, but I reassured him. "It's a unique celebration, dear. 3 decades deserve something special." What he didn't know was that I was paying for a large part with the money I had secretly set aside. In February, I approached Augustus with an apparently innocent idea. I was thinking of making a video retrospective of our life together to show at the party. What do you think? He looked visibly uncomfortable, but again couldn't refuse without seeming suspicious. "Great idea, dear." I hired a young videographer, a nephew of a friend who didn't know our family personally. I gave him a careful selection of happy photos and videos, moments that seemed to portray a perfect marriage. At the same time, I was secretly working on a second video. This one contained the evidence I had collected over the last few months. Excerpts of recorded conversations, compromising messages, images captured by the hidden cameras, financial documents showing the diversion of money. I edited everything carefully, making sure there was no doubt about the nature of their relationship. March was the month to finalize the practical details of my post-exposure plan. I discreetly rented an apartment in another city using only my name. I transferred most of the money I had saved to this new account. I prepared a suitcase with important documents and objects of sentimental value, leaving it at the house of a trusted friend, the only person who had a vague idea of what I was planning, although she didn't know all the details. Also that month, I did something I never imagined doing. I visited a private detective, not to investigate, I already had enough evidence, but for guidance on how to ensure that the evidence I had was legally valid. Following his advice, I redid some recordings in specific contexts and obtained written statements from people who, without knowing, had witnessed suspicious behavior over the years. In the first week of April, just a few weeks before the vow renewal, I took a risky step. I confronted Mom's closest friend, Teresa. Without revealing everything, I insinuated that I knew of something serious involving Mom and Augustus. Her reaction confirmed my suspicions. She knew. "Antonia, dear, some things are better left alone," she said nervously. I pressed a little more, and she ended up admitting that she had suspected for years, but never had the courage to tell me. Before leaving, I made her promise to be present at the vow renewal. "It will be an unforgettable celebration," I guaranteed. 2 weeks before the big date, I had a strangely sincere conversation with Augustus. I talked about how the 30 years had passed quickly, how anxious I was for the celebration, how it would be a new beginning for us. I saw in his eyes a mixture of guilt and relief, probably believing that I would never discover the truth, that we could really have a new beginning with him maintaining his double life. I smiled sweetly and said, "Some surprises are coming, dear. I think this party will mark our lives forever." The last days were of frenzied preparations. I confirmed with the audiovisual technician that both videos were ready and tested. I checked with the caterer that the special champagne I ordered, an exclusive bottle for the final toast, was guaranteed. I mentally rehearsed countless times the exact words I would say at the moment of revelation. The night before the party, I slept surprisingly well. The certainty of what I was about to do brought a tranquility I hadn't felt in months, perhaps years. In the morning, I kissed Augustus as if it were an ordinary day and said, "Today will be special, won't it?" He smiled nervously and replied, "No doubt, dear, a day to remember." In that, he was right. It would be a day none of us would ever forget. April 15th, 2023, dawned sunny, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring in my favor. I opened my eyes even before the alarm clock rang, with that mixture of anxiety and determination that only someone who is about to completely change the course of their own life feels. Augustus was already awake, sitting on the edge of the bed with tense shoulders. I noticed his nervousness when he wished me good morning. His voice trembled slightly, something only someone who had lived with him for 3 decades would notice. "Nervous about the party, dear?" I asked innocently as I got up. "A little," he replied without looking me in the eyes. 30 years is a long time, isn't it?" "Every minute was worth it," I replied, with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Especially this day will be worth every second." The phone rang at 7:30 sharp. It was Mom, anxious as always to take control. "Antonia, dear, I'm already on my way to the party hall to supervise the decoration. Don't worry about anything." "Thank you, Mom," I replied with calculated sweetness. "I don't know what I'd do without you in my life." The words had a double meaning that she would never perceive. I spent the morning at the beauty salon, allowing myself this small luxury. I wanted to look stunning for what was to come. I chose a navy blue dress, not white as there was no innocence to celebrate, elegant and sophisticated, which I had secretly bought weeks before. Navy blue had always been my color, highlighting my eyes in a way that Augustus couldn't resist, even after so many years. While the hairdresser was finishing my hairstyle, I received a message from Claude informing that he and his wife had arrived in town. Marina was also on her way with her husband and my 2 little grandchildren. The idea of exposing the truth in front of the children briefly troubled me, but I reassured myself remembering that I had organized a separate room with recreation for children during the main ceremony. At 2 p.m., when I arrived at the party hall for a final check, I found Mom giving orders to the decorators. At 76, she still maintained the upright posture and attentive look that had always intimidated everyone around her. Except me. Not anymore. "Everything is perfect, Mom," I sincerely complimented. The decoration was really magnificent. White and blue flowers everywhere, elegantly set tables, a dance floor softly lit with lights. The stage for my revelation couldn't be more appropriate. "I just want everything to be special for you, dear," she replied, hugging me. I felt her expensive perfume, probably another gift from Augustus, and resisted the urge to push her away. "It will be unforgettable," I guaranteed, discreetly checking if the audio-visual system was working perfectly. The technician gave me a positive sign from the corner of the room. The 2 flash drives were with him, identified only as Video 1 and Video 2. I returned home to get ready and found Augustus finishing dressing. He was elegant in his new suit, but I noticed sweat stains forming under his arms despite the air conditioning. I helped him with his tie, a gesture I had repeated countless times throughout our marriage. Our eyes met in the mirror. "You look beautiful," he said, turning to hold my hands. "Save the compliments for later," I replied with an enigmatic smile. "Tonight, we will have a lot to say to each other." We arrived at the hall at 6 p.m., 1 hour before the official start of the ceremony. The first guests were already arriving. Close friends, family members, Augustus's work colleagues, my friends from the school where I taught. We greeted everyone with rehearsed smiles, receiving congratulations and admiration for our lasting union. At 7 o'clock sharp, with the hall already full, more than 200 people had confirmed their presence. The Master of Ceremonies announced the beginning of the celebration. Augustus and I walked together to the small altar specially decorated for the occasion. My children, Claude and Marina, sat in the front row, smiling and proud. Mom was beside them, radiant in her emerald green dress, a color that I knew was Augustus's favorite. The celebrant, a longtime family friend, began the ceremony with emotional words about love, commitment, and fidelity. The irony didn't escape me, and I noticed that Augustus was becoming increasingly restless beside me. Mom kept her eyes fixed on us, or rather, on him, with an intensity that I was surprised no one else had noticed over the years. After the initial speeches, the moment I had carefully planned arrived: the presentation of the retrospective video of our life together. The lights in the hall dimmed, and a large screen descended behind the altar. "Before we renew our vows," I announced into the microphone, "I prepared a little surprise, a video that summarizes our journey together." I looked directly at Augustus, whose face had paled. 30 years give many stories to tell, don't they, dear? The video began exactly as everyone expected. Photos of our engagement, the wedding, the birth of our children, happy birthdays and Christmases. The emotional soundtrack drew sighs and smiles from the audience. Augustus visibly relaxed beside me, probably believing that I knew nothing, that his secret life would remain untouched. Then, after exactly 7 minutes of happy memories, the screen went black for a few seconds. I felt Augustus tense again when the image returned. They were no longer family photos, but the first of the evidence I had collected over the months. A clear recording of Augustus and Mom in our own office, in a moment of intimacy that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. A confused murmur spread through the hall. Augustus froze beside me, unable to move or speak. Mom, from the front row, stood up abruptly but seemed equally paralyzed. The video continued relentlessly. Explicit text messages appeared on the screen, enlarged so everyone could read. Excerpts of recorded conversations with their perfectly recognizable voices echoed through the hall. Financial documents showing the regular transfers to Mom's account over decades. And finally, the most recent recording from just a month ago, where they discussed how they would continue meeting after the vow renewal. When the lights came back on, the silence in the hall was absolute. 200 pairs of eyes alternated between me, Augustus, and Mom, trying to process what they had just witnessed. My children seemed in shock, unable to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal that had just been exposed. I walked calmly to the microphone, my voice firmer than it had ever been. "As you can see, we are indeed celebrating 30 years today," I said pausedly. 30 years of betrayal, of lies, of an affair that began even before our marriage. 30 years in which I was deceived not only by the man who swore to love me, but also by the woman who should have protected me above all. Augustus finally recovered his voice, approaching me with his hands extended in supplication. "Antonia, please, we can explain." I pushed his hands away with a decisive gesture. "There is nothing to explain. The images speak for themselves." I turned to the guests, most still in shock. "Thank you all for coming. Unfortunately, there will be no vow renewal today. However, I have some important announcements to make." I took an envelope from my pocket and opened it slowly. "First, I would like to inform you that the divorce papers have already been prepared. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow, Augustus." His eyes widened in panic. Mom had collapsed in her chair, her face hidden in her hands. "Second, I am pleased to announce that the ranch we inherited from your parents, Augustus, the one you generously transferred to my name last Christmas, will be transformed into the headquarters of the new Antonia Rogers Foundation for Women in Vulnerable Situations." A slight murmur of approval spread through the audience. I noticed some of my friends exchanging looks of admiration. Finally, I would like to inform you that all the joint savings I managed to recover, approximately 60% of what we had, have been transferred to a new account. Half of this amount will be divided between our children. I looked at Claude and Marina, who still seemed dazed. The other half will finance my new beginning. I turned directly to Augustus and Mom. "As for you two, you are free to be together now. Without lies, without secret meetings, free also to explain to everyone, including your grandchildren, the nature of your relationship. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the nearest table. The clinking of the metal in the silence of the hall seemed to echo indefinitely. "The party continues," I announced, surprising everyone. "The caterer is paid, the music is hired, the champagne is chilled. Consider this my liberation celebration. As for me, I have a plane to catch." It was at this moment that Augustus finally reacted, running in my direction. "You can't do this. It's our life, our house, our money." I faced him with a calmness that made him back away. "It was our life, Augustus. You and Mom made your choices for 30 years. Today I made mine." I walked toward the exit, stopping only to hug my children and assure them we would talk the next day. As I crossed the hall, I felt everyone's eyes following me. There was no shame in my steps, only the dignity of someone who finally reclaimed control of their own story. In the parking lot, the taxi I had ordered was already waiting for me. Through the windows of the hall, I could see the confusion that had set in. Augustus was frantically gesticulating, trying to explain the inexplicable. Mom remained seated, apparently in a state of shock. My children were together, consoling each other in the face of the revelation they had just witnessed. I entered the taxi with just a small suitcase. Everything I needed for the next few days was in the apartment I had secretly rented. The driver, oblivious to the drama I had just staged, routinely asked me, "To the airport, ma'am?" "Yes," I replied, feeling the weight of 3 decades dissipating from my shoulders. "To the airport, please." As the car moved away, I looked one last time at the illuminated hall. 30 years of lies had ended in one night of truth. I didn't feel joy, not exactly, but a profound sense of justice fulfilled. And for the first time in a long time, the future seemed full of possibilities. The taxi dropped me off at the airport at 9:45 that unforgettable night. I boarded the 11:30 p.m. flight to San Diego, a city I had never been to but had always wanted to visit. I purposely chose a destination that had no connection whatsoever with my previous memories. During the 5-hour flight, I felt a confused mixture of emotions: relief, sadness, fear of the unknown, and surprisingly, a lightness I hadn't experienced in decades. I arrived at 1:30 a.m., staying at a small hotel near the beach that I had reserved weeks before using only my first name. I slept deeply for the first time in months, without nightmares, without waking up startled, wondering where Augustus might be or with whom. The next morning, the phone rang at 8 o'clock. It was Claude, my son. His voice sounded choked between anger and disbelief. "Where are you, Mom? We're all worried." "I'm fine, son. I needed this distance. How is your sister?" "Destroyed. We all are. It's difficult to process. Why didn't you tell us before?" "And would you have believed me? Against your father and your grandmother?" The silence that followed was his answer. We arranged that he and Marina would come to meet me the following week, when I was more settled. I didn't reveal my exact location. I wasn't ready for Augustus to know where to find me. That same day, I received an email from my lawyer informing me that Augustus had been officially notified about the divorce. Apparently, he was devastated and wanted a chance to explain himself. I instructed the lawyer to keep all communication strictly professional and related only to legal procedures. Mom also tried to contact me, dozens of voice messages, each more desperate than the previous one. In her last attempt, she even said that everything was Augustus's fault, that he had manipulated her all these years. I deleted them all without responding. Her ability to exempt herself from blame, even now, only confirmed that my decision had been correct. The first days in San Diego were about adaptation. I rented a small furnished apartment with an ocean view using part of the savings I had set aside. It was a simple space, but mine alone. Perhaps the first place I could truly call my own in my entire adult life. A week after my arrival, as arranged, Claude and Marina came to visit me. They were calmer, but still trying to understand the dimension of what had happened. Marina brought some old photos she had rescued from the house before Augustus could destroy them. "He's selling everything," she told me. the house, the cars, emptying accounts. Grandma moved in there temporarily, but they barely speak to each other now. "What are people saying?" I asked, trying not to show that I cared about others' opinions. "The entire town is talking about nothing else," Claude replied. "Some defend Dad, say you exaggerated with the public exposure, but most are on your side, especially the women." We talked for hours. I cried for the first time since the night of the revelation, not for the lost marriage, but for the lost time, for the years I dedicated to a lie. My children cried with me. Before leaving, Marina firmly held my hands. "You deserve to be happy, Mom. Really happy." It was the beginning of a slow process of reconnection with my children. The betrayal hadn't been just against me, but against our entire family. They also needed time to process that part of their history had been built on lies. May 2023 brought the first legal challenges. Augustus contested the transfer of the ranch, claiming he didn't know what he was signing. My lawyer presented evidence that he was fully aware during the signing, including photos of the moment. The judge ruled in my favor, and the property remained in my name. In June, I materialized the foundation project, using the ranch as headquarters. I established a support center for women in vulnerable situations, especially victims of abusive relationships. I hired social workers, psychologists, and lawyers. It wasn't just about revenge against Augustus. It was about transforming my pain into something positive, creating meaning from suffering. I managed everything from a distance, with discreet monthly visits to the town. July 2023 marked the finalization of the divorce. Augustus finally accepted the terms, realizing that the evidence against him was overwhelming and that any contestation would only prolong his public humiliation. The division was more favorable to me than normal, considering the circumstances of the separation. I signed the final documents without feeling any nostalgia, just the relief of a chapter closed. Using part of the money received in the separation, I enrolled in an art therapy course. I had always liked painting, but never had the time or encouragement to develop this talent. At 66, I became a student again, surrounded by young people who surprisingly welcomed me with respect and curiosity. My life experience became a valuable asset in discussions about art as a healing tool. In September, I received an unexpected call from Teresa, Mom's best friend. Apparently, things hadn't worked out between the two finally free lovers. Augustus had asked Mom to marry him, probably trying to legitimize the relationship in the eyes of society, but she refused. According to Teresa, Mom had said that the excitement was in the clandestinity. Without the taste of the forbidden, without the adrenaline of secrecy, the relationship quickly wore out. Augustus moved to Chicago, where apparently he began working at a smaller bank. Mom remained in town, facing the ostracism of the community. "She's suffering, Antonia," Teresa said, obviously trying to awaken my pity. "No one invites her anywhere anymore. People cross the street to avoid greeting her." "Choices have consequences, Teresa," I simply replied. "She made hers for 30 years. Now she's reaping what she sowed." In October, my new life gained another unexpected component. During a local art exhibition where I presented some paintings, I met Robert, a retired university professor of 65, also divorced, with a very different story from mine, but equally marked by new beginnings. We began an unpretentious friendship, meeting for coffee after art therapy classes, exchanging books and opinions about movies. Before we realized, we were seeing each other almost daily. In November, he officially invited me to dinner. It was my first date after 30 years with the same person. I felt nervous like a teenager, but also secure in a way I had never experienced before. With Robert, there was no need to pretend or diminish myself. He appreciated my strength, my newly discovered independence. "You're an extraordinary woman, Antonia," he told me that night. "You transformed a tragedy into triumph." Christmas 2023 was an important milestone. My children and grandchildren came to spend the holidays in my new home. I rented a larger beach house to accommodate everyone. For the first time in decades, we celebrated without the presence of Augustus or Mom. It was different, sometimes strange, but genuinely happy. Marina commented that she had never seen me smile so much. Claude brought news from town. The foundation was thriving, helping dozens of women. Augustus had tried to return recently but found closed doors. As for Mom, apparently she had fallen ill, nothing serious, but enough to arouse some concern. "Do you intend to see her someday?" Claude carefully asked. "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Forgiveness is a process, son. I'm still in the middle of it." January 2024 brought an unexpected proposal. Robert was invited for a research project in Europe that would last 6 months and invited me to accompany him. My first impulse was to refuse. I had never left the United States, never imagined such an adventure at my age. But then I realized, why not? What was holding me back? The foundation was working well under the competent administration I had hired. My children were established in their own lives. For the first time, I was completely free to choose. In February, we embarked for Portugal, the first of 5 countries we would visit. I sent postcards to my children from each city, collected memories I never imagined I would have, experienced foods I didn't even know existed. In Paris, visiting the Louvre, Robert surprised me with a question. "Would you regret investing in us, Antonia?" It wasn't exactly a marriage proposal. We both had enough experience to know that papers don't define relationships. It was an invitation to build something together, in our time, in our way. "No," I replied with certainty. "I wouldn't regret it at all." We returned to the United States in August 2024, not to San Diego, but to Chicago, where Robert had family, and where we decided to establish our new base. I bought a cozy apartment in a tree-lined neighborhood with enough space for a small painting studio. By this time, my paintings were already beginning to be sold in small galleries, nothing grand, but a recognition that fed my soul. In September, I received the news that Mom was seriously ill, an aggressive cancer diagnosed late. Marina called crying, asking me to consider a visit. "She keeps asking about you, Mom. Maybe it's the last chance." After days of deep reflection and long conversations with Robert and my therapist, yes, I had finally sought professional help. I decided to visit Mom, not for her, but for me, to close this cycle on my own terms. I flew to my hometown in October, staying at Marina's house. Mom was in the hospital, visibly weakened by the disease. When I entered the room, her eyes filled with tears. "Antonia, you came." I sat beside her bed without taking her hand, maintaining a calculated distance. "I came." "Do you forgive me?" she asked directly, her voice weak. "I'm not here for that, Mom. I'm here to say that despite everything you did, I managed to find peace. It's not about forgiveness or reconciliation, it's about closure." She closed her eyes, tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. "I understand. I don't deserve more than that." We talked for almost an hour, not about the past. There was nothing to add there, but about my new life, my projects, my grandchildren. I told her about the foundation, about how I was helping other women rebuild their lives. Before leaving, I left beside her bed a small painting I had brought, a sunrise over the sea, symbolizing new beginnings. "Goodbye, Mom," I said simply. She passed away 2 weeks later. I attended the funeral, serene and distant, offering support to my children, but keeping myself emotionally reserved. Augustus appeared briefly, aged and downcast. Our eyes met once across the cemetery. There was no more anger or hurt, just the silent recognition of 2 people who once shared a life, now following irrevocably separate paths. In December 2024, the foundation completed its first year with results that exceeded all expectations. More than 50 women had been helped, many completely rebuilding their lives. I was invited to give a talk about my experience. I initially hesitated, but ended up accepting. It was time to transform my private story into public inspiration. And now, in May 2025, 2 years after that night that changed everything, I'm here recording this video at the request of my oldest granddaughter, who insisted that my story needed to be shared. "Grandma, "You need to tell this to other women," she said. And she was right. I learned that it's never too late to start over, that age is just a number when it comes to dignity and self-determination, that relationships should elevate us, not diminish us, and mainly that true power isn't in revenge for revenge's sake, but in the ability to transform pain into purpose. Today, at 68, I feel more alive and more authentic than I ever was. Robert and I are planning a trip to Asia next year. I continue painting and managing the foundation from a distance. My children are well, my grandchildren growing healthy. If you're watching this video and identify with any part of my story, I want you to know. There is no prison more secure than the one we build for ourselves when we accept less than we deserve. And there is no sweeter freedom than the one we find when we finally gather the courage to say, enough. Life really begins when we decide that we deserve to be the protagonists of our own story. It's never too late to turn the page and start a new chapter. Believe me, I know what I'm talking about. My dears, if you enjoyed my story, don't forget to like the video, comment, share, and subscribe to the Grandma's Diary. A big hug from Grandma Antonia until next time.